Sir, mathematical models that were designed in relation to this pandemic have failed miserably. So the first question is that were they exaggerated? And secondly, you have shown in one of your recent articles that the data from the World Health Organization also shows that these models have failed. So can you tell us on what basis were these models created, or rather who created them?
These models actually, in the best of the models, are academic exercises. They should not be taken as guiding policy, because the best models have a shelf life of 2 weeks only. Those who are serious modelers themselves will say that best models have got a shelf life of after 2 weeks. You have to update the model because things change. It is like a game of chess. Even the best grandmasters cannot predict more than 3 moves. I was just reading a book by Kasparov, the former world chess champion. He says whenever people interview me, they think grandmasters can think 20 moves in advance. He says no grandmaster can think more than 3 moves in advance, because so many permutation combinations other chesses move. So exactly this is what happens in communicable disease dynamics. You cannot make a model which will last more than 2 weeks. Because as I said, R0 changes, and R0 is reproduction rate is different in Western countries, it is different in developing countries, the population densities are different, then people get infected, and then so it doesn't, it's a theoretical, but however, it makes the career of scientists, it makes the career of politicians also. Because if they make a mathematical model which will predict very high deaths, and that deaths will never take place, they will say that all our measures have helped it. So the public imagination, public thinks the mathematics is exact. Mathematics, it is garbage out. So if you take wrong inputs, the mathematical models cause more harm than good. In fact, I have been doing peer review of mathematical models from journals. A few papers came to me and I found those shortcomings. I sent it back, and I knew some of the people who make these models. I told them that next time there's a pandemic, all modelers should be quarantined at the start of a pandemic, and they should be released after the pandemic. Otherwise they cause more harm than good. So that is, and they may doing it that they sometimes it may be partly ignorance, not knowing the nuances, not knowing the finer details, not knowing the social. And you will be surprised to know this lockdown model, the social distancing model, they are mathematical models. They have been based on the high school project of a scientist's daughter. In 2015, she did a high school computer project to control influenza, closure of school. So they took the people as inert units, but people are social beings. They are not inert. They mix. They cannot isolate. You cannot sanitize. So these models were based on a high school project of a daughter of a government scientist in USA, and then they made the computer simulation. If they do social distancing, if they do lockdown, so many cases will come down. But in actual practice, it doesn't happen like that. So these models are good for learning processes, for identify these are the factors. But everybody, I call them mouse click epidemiologists. Like epidemiology, in our time, we used to go to visit the house, we see the local conditions, that social epidemiology. Then came the armchair epidemiology, sitting and giving this advice on panel and other things without going to the site. Now we have got the mouse click epidemiologists who just take data and they just feed it and they click the mouse and outputs comes out. So until unless you combine them, visit, see the living conditions in India. Many people, middle class people or rich people in India, they have never seen a slum. They don't know that how many people stay. So model will not work there. That will work in there which has been in other country where the population density is less. So model can be, you have to see the context of the model. Model cannot be applied. The same model will not work. You take a Mercedes and you cannot drive in a slum in a Mercedes. You can drive on the highway. So these models are also like that. They can work in different way, but it's a very complicated thing. It's not an easy thing, and we have tried to, amateurist and simplistic approach has caused more harm.
So when such projections are being made in the public domain, For example, in such modeling, should not there be any declaration of conflict of interest?
They have declared, I think the latest model which they made, they declared that it is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates and WHO and Gilead or something. They are declaring it, but who reads the small print? It is something if you buy an insurance and you are not reading the small print. So models, they just make those, so they do declare, but they know nobody is going to read that except you and me.
Peter Doshi has written in an article that the trials of the vaccine have been jeopardized by starting universal vaccination.
Exactly. I mentioned it, I think. I said that you have to have a control group. That is the basic of all trial. That uncontaminated group, and there is no ethical issue if non-vaccinating the people who have recovered from natural infection. There is no, in fact, there is an ethical issue of giving an unknown thing to a person who will not benefit. And now the evidence shows that there is no extra benefit of a person who has recovered, and particularly in a young person. So Peter Doshi is very right, and he was, I think, he was deplatformed from YouTube and other things. Because you see, that way I am finding BMJ is one of the editors of BMJ. So BMJ is one journal which has really maintained some semblance of scientific integrity. So I have regards for Peter Doshi, I have regards for the BMJ.